Hi, Josue. Today, our lesson that we're going to focus on is making personal connections within the text. This is going to help strengthen your comprehension and make you a better reader. So, the objectives that we're going to focus mainly on is first the language objective, which is students will be able to show and identify personal connections within the text. And then our content objective will be the student will be able to demonstrate understanding of text by making personal connections. So let's make some connections. Here's what we'll do. We're going to do text to self, text to text, and text to world. Now you're probably wondering what these three mean. So text to self connections are highly personal connections that a reader makes between a piece of reading material and the reader's own experiences or life. An example of this would be, this story reminds me of a vacation we took to my grandfather's farm. Text to text is when reading, readers are reminded of other things that they have read, other books by the same author, stories from a similar genre, or perhaps on the same topic. Readers gain insight during reading by thinking about how the information they are reading connects to other familiar text. An example would be, this character has the same problem that I read about in a story last year. Text to world connections are the larger connections that a reader brings to a reading situation. We all have ideas about how the world works that goes far beyond our own personal experiences. We learn about things through television, movies, magazines, and newspapers. Text to world connections are what us teachers are trying to enhance when we go over comprehension with you. So this is really important to make sure that you really understand this. And an example of text to world connection would be when a reader says, I saw a program on television that talked about things described in this article. All right, now that I gave you a little more insight, Josue, we're going to watch this quick video that's about 1 minute long that just reiterates everything that I just told you.
This week, we will be learning about making connections. When we read, we find ways that the text is like things in our own lives and other texts we have read. There are 3 ways we can make connections to the text. We can use text-to-self connections, we can use text-to-text connections, and we can use text-to-world connections. Let's first take a look at text-to-self connections. When you make a text-to-self connection, you're relating something from the story to yourself. For example, when I was reading the story, Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, it made me think of the time when I really wanted cookies and I wasn't allowed to have them. Just like when Pigeon wants to drive the bus, but he's not allowed to. Now let's take a look at text-to-text connections. When I am making a text-to-text connection, I am relating something from the story that I am currently reading to a story that I have read in the past. For example, when Pigeon wants to drive the bus and Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, it reminds me of when the cows wanted electric blankets from the farmer in Click Clack Moo, Cows That Type. Finally, let's take a look at text-to-world connections. When you are making text-to-world connections, you are relating something from the story you are currently reading to something that's happening in your community or neighborhood or even the news. For example, when Pigeon wants to drive the bus, it makes me think about how bus drivers right now have to wear masks when they drive the bus. Thank you so much for watching this quick video about making connections. I hope you have just as much fun making connections as I did.
All right, after watching that video, Josue, I hope that helped you understand a little more of what I just went over with you.
This week, we will...
All right, how does this help you? It helps readers understand how characters feel and the motivation behind their actions. It helps readers have a clear picture in their head as they read, thus making the reader more engaged. It keeps the reader from becoming bored while reading. It sets a purpose for reading and keeps the reader focused. Readers can see how other readers connected to the reading. It focuses readers to become actively involved. And lastly, it helps readers remember what they have read and ask questions about the text. These are really important to grasp, Jose, because when you try to make connections, these are things that you need to remember and will help you. Now, some examples of connecting statements to trigger conversation in your head or with a partner or even with me is this part reminds me of. So when you're reading the text, that's like something we can stop and you can be like, oh, this right here, I remember this. I felt like the character when if that happened to me, I would. This book reminds me of another text because I can relate to part of text because one time and something similar happened to me when. These are all just to spark ideas in your head when we read the passage that I'm about to show you. These are just something you can refer to and help you right now and in the future. So let's take action and put everything we just learned to the test. So here's a passage. It's about Mexico, which is where you're from. So that's why I chose this article so that you're able to connect and relate to it. And I'll read it aloud to you. And then after this, we're going to go through a couple of topic ideas that will help you make connections to the text. You can refer back to it. You can refer back to the questions, but these are all going to prepare you for the assessment that I'm going to give you after this. So let me read this to you. So like I said, the passage is called Mexico. And let's start at the beginning. The country of Mexico is the third largest nation in terms of land area and second largest nation in terms of population in North America. As of 2006, Mexico's population was well over 100 million people. Mexico is located south of the United States and north of the nations of Belize and Guatemala. The Rio Bravo, called Rio Grande in America, forms much of the border between the United States and Mexico. Spanish is the official language of Mexico. Did you know that many of our words, such as tornado, tomato, taco, armadillo, and banana, come from the Spanish language? In fact, much of our land came from Mexico too. The states of Texas, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, California, and Arizona were all parts of Mexico before the Mexican War. Mexico is a land full of contrast. Northern parts of Mexico are dominated by the Sonoran and Chihuahuacan deserts. The Sonoran Desert is the world's most biologically diverse desert and contains the world's entire supply of saguaro cacti. The central portion of Mexico is dominated by the mountainous Mexican plateau. The southern parts are characterized by rainforests. Mexico's rainforests are high in biodiversity and feature animals such as jaguars, cougars, and exotic parrots. Mexico features high mountain ridges on its Pacific coast and on its eastern sides. Its highest point is known as Pico de Orizaba, located near the city of Puebla. Pico de Orizaba rises 18,701 feet above sea level. It is the third highest mountain in North America as well as the continent's highest volcano. Pico de Orizaba is classified as dormant volcano as it last erupted in 1846. Mexico is well known as a popular tourist destination. People from all over the world come to bask on its beautiful beaches in Cancun and Acapulco. In addition, Mexico has dozens of important archaeological sites that preserve ancient Mayan ruins. The most famous site is Chichen Itza, a major Mayan city that lasted over 600 years on the Yucatan Peninsula. As you can tell, there's a lot to do in Mexico and a lot of really neat things to see. For more information, stop by your local library and check out a book on Mexico or visit one of the 100 websites dedicated to illustrating all that is wonderful about Mexico. Now that we have read the passage, we're going to apply the three things: text to self, text to text, and text to world. So here's a list. We're going to start with some text to self, and here are some questions we're going to go through. What does this remind me of in my life? What is similar to in my life? How is this different from my life? Has something like this ever happened to me? How does this relate to my life? What were my feelings when I read this? These are all things you can think about. The next one is text to text. What does this remind me of in another book I've read? How is this text similar to other things I've read? How is this different from other books I've read? How have I read about something like this before? And then text to world. What does this remind me of in the real world? How is the text similar to things that happen in the real world? How is this different from things that happen in the real world? And how did that part relate to the world around me? So these are all things that you can refer back to when we do the assessment. These are all really important to remember. Now, I will be handing you an assessment. You're able to refer back to the passage and the 3 slides to help you generate questions if you get stuck. But also on your assessment, it explains to you. So we're going to start with text to self, and you're going to put 2 connections that you gained from the passage. So like it says on the worksheet, in what ways can you personally connect to your guided reading text? Then the second part of it is text-to-text connections. In what ways can you connect what you are reading to another book character you have read? What does this book remind you of? Two more connections. And then lastly, your text-to-world connections. How does what you are reading relate to issues that are going on in the real world? So two more on that. And I'll give you some time to do that. Why is this important for you to learn? Good readers make connections to their background knowledge. They activate their schema, which is the prior experience that students bring to the text they are reading. In the case of ELs, the schema that they bring to the classroom may be very different from their classmates' experiences. It is therefore important that teachers help ELs to relate their schema to the book they are reading. The goal during reading workshop is to help our students make the following connections: text to self, text to text, and text to world. Making authentic connections to text helps ELs gain a more profound understanding of the content. So overall, you are gaining understanding, you're learning comprehension, you're becoming a good reader because these connections are something that you're able to relate to, so that you're better able to understand, and that you're just more involved with the content being shared. How can we relate this to our prior lesson that we learned? Prior to this lesson, we focused on sentence structuring with punctuation and how to apply them in writing. So although writing and comprehension aren't correlated the way we expect them to, we can look at this from the standpoint of being able to make connections in our writing, whether it be personally or from prior knowledge. This technique can be helpful if implemented into writing. Making connections not only makes a good writer, but it also makes a good reader. All right, Josue, that was our lesson for today. I hope that you gain more knowledge, and after you finish your assessment, we can see where you're at and go from there.